So I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Speaker Series. I'm Brian Grady, an Assistant Marine Coordinator with the partnership with TNC. And I'd just like to start off by talking about how the goal of the series is to provide an opportunity to learn more about the partners and the work being done in South Kohala. This work was meant to catalyze from what the Division of Aquatic Resources has started and the Coral Reef Working Group to identify South Kohala as a priority area for the Hawaii Coral Reef Strategy to implement action to reduce anthropogenic impacts on coral reefs and marine ecosystems in the South Kohala region and West Hawaii. So in 2018, over 30 organizations and agencies participated in creating the South Kohala Coastal Partnership and the Conservation Action Plan for 2030. And this outlines 6 specific strategies to guide the partnership and a collective group and work towards restoring and protecting coastal resources in South Kohala. And so as part of this, we do our speaker series, and it's a privilege today to introduce Avalon, who has been our intern for the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. They have been doing their TCBS, the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Studies master's work over the past 2 years with us since about 2021. And they're going to talk today a little bit more about what they've been doing in the partnership and all the different projects. So with that, I will turn it over to Avalon, and they'll go over their presentation.
Aloha, folks. So I think Bryant will be sharing my slides in just a second here. And I also just want to mention, if folks have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we can go over those afterwards. We'll have time for people to ask questions at the end as well. But you know, if something pops into your head, because I'm going to be going through a lot of information and you want to just type it in the chat as it comes up, then we can go through that later. And I'll wait just a second here as Bryant gets that set up. Okie dokie. Okay, so let's go to the next slide just for my background information. Awesome. Okay, so Brian gave a good little introduction of who I am, but I'll go ahead and explain a little bit more about myself. So aloha, everybody. My name is Avalon Paradea. I use they, them pronouns. I was raised and reside in Waikoloa Village with my ohana. I graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2014 with a bachelor's in anthropology and a minor in ethnobotany. So I have a really deep interest in the relationships that we humans share with the natural world around us, especially with our mea kanu, our plant friends. My first foray into conservation work or environmental conservation work was with the Kupu internship, first with the Ko'ola Mountains Watershed Partnership on Oahu. And it was a completely life-changing experience. We would work in these really beautiful, very native-dominated areas up in the Ko'ola Mountains, often helicoptering in. Although my background does include ethnobotany, learning about plants in a classroom setting is very different from learning about them on the ground. And so having this very in-person experience with our native plants was really phenomenal for me and completely changed my entire outlook on our entire environment, especially on Oahu, which I, to that point, had mostly seen as being a cityscape. I moved back home to Hawaii Island in 2016, and I completed a second Kupu internship with the Natural Area Reserve Systems, or NARS, and also completely transformative. Growing up on this island in the suburbs of Waikoloa, I only saw a very small snippet of this island, and working with NARS was great because we worked all over the island. So I just feel like I was able to really deepen my relationships with our natural environment. After finishing that Kupu internship, I worked for 3.5 years as a cultural resources technician and specialist at Pohakuloa with the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii. And again, incredible landscape up there. I feel very grateful to have been able to do that work and acquaint myself with an area that unfortunately very few people are able to experience. I'm also an Aina-based artist. I started working with natural materials, including kapa, which I'll explain a little bit further later in this presentation, between the years of about 2016, 2017. So I've been using natural materials in my art for the past 6 to 7 years. And as of 2021, I've been a graduate student in the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science program, or TCBES program at Hilo. And I am in the internship track. There's two options with TCBES. You can either do a thesis or you can do an internship. And my primary internship is with the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. And then I've also done work with additional partner organizations through SKCP. So that's me. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of repeat a little bit of what Bryant explained in terms of the background of the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. But the South Kohala Coastal Partnership was formally organized in 2012, largely in response to a need to protect our marine ecosystems and habitats. TCBES, I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying that acronym. SKCP is coordinated through the Nature Conservancy and is comprised of over 50 different organizations and project partners throughout the South Kohala region. I really see us as a whole, essentially embodying the watershed from Malka to Mackay with so many different project partners and unique backgrounds, abilities, and interests. And I think Bryant will go ahead and plug the link to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership website in the chat if you have a chance to do that, just so folks can learn a little bit more. So to reiterate one of the things that Bryant mentioned earlier, the South Kohala Coastal Action Plan 2030, or SKCAP 2030, was developed in 2018 with the help of over 70 different partners over the course of 2 years. Threats to our coastline include climate change, pollution, erosion, wildfires, development, and other anthropogenically driven effects. Several declines in ecosystem health in this region have been noted by kupuna who are long familiar with this area. So this action plan is available on the website. There's a really poignant quote in there from Francis, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, but he's one of the Kiai down at Kalahuipua, and he mentions how for every one fish we see today, Francis Ruddle, mahalo back, I appreciate that. But yeah, Uncle Francis Ruddle mentions that for every fish that we see today, he's seen 7. And I think that that quote speaks volumes just in that single sentence alone. So the plan identifies 5 priority strategies. These are our resilient ocean policy, soil and watershed management, clean water management, county and community conservation planning, and community connectivity and stewardship. These priority strategies are comprised of folks in various organizations who meet on a quarterly basis to discuss projects they're working on in their respective arenas, sharing observations, shortcomings, and successes. And as mentioned, you can find this document. It's actually very easy to read. At least I feel it's really accessible. So I highly recommend taking a look at that if you have a chance. So for each of these different organizations that I've worked with, I've kind of gone into this with a different olelo noeau or Hawaiian saying that's kind of helped guide my work. So this is actually listed on the SKCP website, Aohe Hana Nui Ke Alu Ia. No task is too big when done together by all. And so here's a photo of all of us from January of this year. This was our all partners gathering. So we're trying to have these get-togethers once or twice a year of as many partners as we can get. We were able to go out and talk story and share food with each other and, you know, share ideas. And it was a really beautiful experience with a lot of really amazing people. So my hana and kuleana, my work and my responsibilities. I have taken on the role of being a strategy team leader for the community connectivity and stewardship team. So this has involved me reaching out to folks in that particular team, facilitating meetings, taking notes, and that kind of leads into the next thing, which is I've been helping write a newsletter that we're hoping to get out there soon once we're able to vet that. And both of these activities sort of help keep everybody afloat as to what other organizations are doing, helps facilitate communication between folks. You know, if there's areas where somebody could use help, for example, identifying that person who might be able to aid them, or vice versa, if somebody needs help, being like, hey, you know, we're able to offer this assistance. I've also been able to host several of our speaker series over the past year. So you might remember me from helping with some of those introductions and note-taking and question asking and stuff. So I've been able to really enhance my ability as a communicator with the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. One of my personal favorite things is, because as great as the virtual stuff is, I personally love in-person events. And so I was able to help with the Wheelie Wheelie Festival both last year and this year. So here's a picture of me and Bryant and just a few of the many, many plants that we were able to get throughout the day, which was awesome. But I love having an opportunity to talk with others about our watershed, how important our Aina is, especially here in South Kohala, and get people excited about protecting our Aina. Okay, so one of the projects that I decided to take upon myself while working with the South Kohala Coastal Partnership was putting together a resource list. So if folks check out our website, there's an additional page that's labeled additional resources. And so what this additional resource list is primarily documents having to do with the South Kohala or with the greater Kohala region. I actually really enjoyed doing this. You know, it was a lot of just sort of Googling keywords, trying to find different reports, especially more recent things. But this includes, you know, archaeological surveys that have been done in our region, oral histories, for example, the ethnographic work that was done by Kepa Mali and his wife Onauna Mali. Kale Langlis has done some really phenomenal interviews with folks from all throughout the region. You know, the stories of these kupuna are really, really important. And I think that these resources, you know, again, like these things can be really easy to find if you know what to look for, but it's great to have just a list right there for anybody interested in learning more. Mo'olelo as well, pertaining to our region. And then also in this additional resource list, I do have some sort of more general things, book lists, for example, for anybody just wanting to learn more about Hawaii in a general sense. Websites that are also really helpful, such as Vehe Vehe, which is our Hawaiian dictionary website, things like that. So I encourage folks to check this out if they have a chance. I think that a lot of these resources are really worth taking a look at. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the work that I did with the Kohala Center. And give me just 1 second as I'm kind of making sure that I can see my screen better. My computer's been acting slow. So I was able to do work with the Kohala Center. So they're one of the project partners within the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. And I worked under the guidance of both Mahina Patterson and Mia Akaula Claire. The Kohala Center was founded in 2000 as a community-based center for research, conservation, and education. As seen in their name, their focus is primarily on the communities throughout the Kohala region. Core concepts that guide their work include energy self-reliance, food self-reliance, and ecosystem health. A really important aspect to their work includes the incorporation of both research and Ike Hawaii, or Indigenous Hawaiian knowledge, into place-based practices. Kohala is our oldest mountain at close to 1 million years old. And although it is extinct volcanically, it is anything but lifeless. This is a photograph that I took during one of our volunteer days in the Kauai corridor. So you can see a lot of native species right there. And when the stream is running, it's really beautiful. It was dry at that time, but I am biased. Don't let the other mauna hear, but Kohala is my favorite mauna. Being raised in Waikoloa, that is just, it's such a beautiful view of Kohala when it's, you know, nice and bright and clear up there. So, yeah. I absolutely love this Olelo no Eau. Leleo Kohala Mehelupe La, Kohala soars as a kite. And this is an expression of admiration for Kohala, a district that has often been a leader in doing good works. Kohala is home to many talented, generous people who are pouring their love into healing our Aina. Groups like the Kohala Center stand as inspirational beacons for what it means to bring pono practices into environmental conservation. I feel very fortunate to have been able to work with these folks. This is a view of Kohala from Puako. All right, so the work that I did with the Kohala Center pertained primarily to the Eke Kipuka project. This is a planned 614-acre enclosure to protect our Wauakua, or our cloud forest, around Pu'u Eke, one of our prominent pu'u up in the further reaches of Kohala. This is on Queen Emma Land Company. Our forest health directly impacts the well-being of our native species, our waters, our own health as well, both physically, culturally, and spiritually. Major threats that have been identified to the forests of Kohala include our feral pua'a, or feral pigs, and Avapuhi kahili, or kahili ginger. Here we see a map of the planned enclosure from their informational brochure, which can be found on their website. And Brian, if you don't mind plugging that link in when you have a chance as well. So you can see in the yellow, that's going to be the 614-acre enclosure up in Kohala, and that's on Queen Emma Land Company, which is demarcated in the purple. And again, I highly recommend reading through their brochure. It's a really beautiful document explaining why our forests are so important for, again, the health of our native species, but also for our own health as human beings as well, and the health of our water systems. Alrighty. And so Mahana and Kuleana with the Kohala Center. Prior to starting any construction for Eke, Mahina Patterson conducted interviews with individuals and small groups with ties to Kohala, including hunters, cultural practitioners, and conservation professionals. These interviews allow folks with the Kohala Center the chance to better understand the pilina that residents share with Kohala, while also providing a chance to explain the purposes of the Eke unit and receive feedback and mana'o from those interviewed. 3 public community meetings were also held in 2022. 2 of these were in person and 1 was on Zoom, which allowed for a continuation of this work. So I assisted with this work by sorting through the transcripts from the interviews that Mahina conducted, looking for major takeaways and ideas shared, as well as attending the community meetings to help take notes and continue listening to feedback that was shared by folks. So in a general sense, major takeaways that I identified were really deep pilina with Kohala. So people really care about our mountain and about the health of our forests. A desire for OEV resource management practices to be brought into conservation work and research, community access and involvement to our forests, and the sharing of scientific data as well. And I think these things are very important. You know, I think coming from a non-scientific background as an anthropologist when I was in undergrad, you know, I didn't really know how to read scientific documents. Being a graduate student now, I have learned how to read these papers, and they're hard. You know, no matter how much you know, it's hard to read scientific information, especially for folks that don't have that kind of background information. And I think that it's very important for us to try to make this information accessible to the public so that they can make informed decisions and opinions regarding the work that's being done to protect our native forests. So along with the takeaways that I identified, I also worked on creating a ginger management guidelines to help facilitate in ginger removal and inform the community of this work. And so I'm still working on that with Mia right now, but what I'm hoping is for that document to be something that can be shared with the community to explain how ginger is being removed, what the plans are with that. And it also does include recommendations to plant native species to help keep the growth of ginger down as well. And what we see here, sorry, I should explain. This is a picture of Kahili ginger. So this is actually directly from the brochure, the Eke project brochure. You can see that the growth habit of ginger is just wild. It grows these really thick mat-like rhizomes under the soil, which completely prevents native species from being able to grow. It just sucks up all the water in the area. It's very thirsty. It's a very fast grower and spreader. And in personal property areas, some people have been able to use backhoes and such to just dig those rhizomes out of the ground. We don't have that option, of course, in native forest. We can't do that kind of, you know, that would cause a lot of damage. And so having to go in, cut these plants, using herbicide to kill them is the best method, and it's very slow going. I've done it myself. A lot of people who I know have done this kind of work, and it works. It just takes a very long time. So yeah, it's important to keep the numbers of Kahili ginger down in order to allow our native species to flourish. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Awesome. So another one of the project partners that I was able to do work with was the Alakaha Kai, and this was under the guidance of Rick Merkin, Mandy Johnson, and Art Arakaki. So the Alakaha Kai is managed through the National Park Service. It was established in 2000 to protect and preserve the 175, roughly, mile historic trail system, which passes through 200 different ahupua'a. I apologize for not having a map up of the trail system, but it starts all the way up in, North Kohala and it wraps all the way around our island, ending in, I think, technically Volcanoes region. So it's almost the entire island. It's really phenomenal. And it is a facet of living history still utilized to this day. So anybody who's ever gone along any of our beaches, especially in South Kohala, since I'm most familiar with our beaches in South Kohala, I can guarantee you have walked the Alakahakai, whether you know it or not. And so here's a photograph of one of the Alakahakai signs showing that you are on the trail. And this is just south of Kaunaoa Bay right here. So yeah, I've been walking these trail systems since I was a kid. And as a kid, I was taught what I was walking, but you know, it's something else as you get older to really conceptualize that you know, these trails have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. We can go to the next slide. I think that this is my Olelo No'eau. So the Olelo No'eau that guided my work was Nana Iwaile me Ikeala Mahope Akumako na Poki'i. He or she first cleared the path, and then we younger ones followed. This saying is meant to share admiration for an older sibling, but I personally love it for its reference to the paths. And I also feel that it can really describe my personal love for the people of old who painstakingly cleared these paths. Every single time I walk the Alakahakai, I just think about how much effort that took, backbreaking effort to be able to make and maintain these trail systems that are still so important to this day. And of course, to the folks that continue to do this work as well to take care of our trails. All right, so my hana and kuleana. My primary project in working with the Alakahakai was conducting a vegetation survey from Ohai'ula, which is usually referred to as Spencer Beach Park, south to Kaunaoa Bay, which is roughly a 2-mile stretch of coastline. The purpose of the survey was to document native species, both indigenous and endemic, as well as Polynesian introduced species along the trail or on the public Makai side of the trail, since the Mauka sides are generally privately owned or privately managed. While archaeological features have often been the focus for a lot of surveys along the trail system, our mea kanu or our plants have not been as widely documented. Our mea kanu kahakai, our coastal plants, are very important for all sorts of reasons. Erosion control is a big thing, as habitat and food sources for other native species and for their cultural importance as well. So this is one of my favorite pictures that I've used a lot ever since doing this work. This is a photo of one of our ilima, which is an indigenous plant that grows all over South Kohala. And this was during my survey that I took this photo, and this is one of our Nalo Meli Maoli, our endemic Hylaea bees, our yellow-faced bees. So this is a very exciting moment for me because I've seen them before, but I was with my partner while I was doing the survey, and he was like, wow, I wonder what these pollinators are. And it made me pause, and you know, instead of just being like, oh, it's an ilima, whatever, you know, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere. I was like, oh my God, look at this. This is a native bee feeding from this ilima, and it really goes to show why we need to pay attention to even just the little things that we take for granted when we're out and about. So yeah, got very excited about taking this picture. I'm glad it sat still long enough. So my work culminated in the creation of a publicly accessible map of the species that I encountered. I should also mention, I did not do a full 100% survey. So what I did was I walked the trail system very, very slowly. And I was taking points the whole time using my phone and using an app called Avenza. Avenza is a free app. I highly recommend it. I think it's really great personally. Very easy to use. You know, it's a great way for people to learn more about their ecosystem. You know, if you find a tree that you're interested in, taking a point of it, for example. And so what I did was I plotted points of the plants that I encountered. And although I didn't plot every single individual plant, mostly what I was doing was taking points for representative plants. So there were a few species that were really ubiquitous. The Ilima is one good example. Uhaloa is another really common plant that I didn't take points for either one of those for the most part, as well as coconut trees, because along that stretch, a lot of the coconut trees were growing more on private land. So I didn't take points for those 3 species for the most part, but a lot of these other plants, I did take points for almost every single individual that I saw that was accessible from the trail. And I apologize if this map is a little hard to see. So Bryant just dropped a link. As mentioned, this is publicly accessible, so folks can actually take a look at this map. It's interactive. You can zoom in. You can click on the points. I have a few more. I have a few more notes that I actually want to plug in for some of these plants at some point soon. But for now, it's just got the name of each individual plant and a legend. And so next time you guys are walking along this trail, I encourage you to try to find some of these plants. You know, I admit that it was a little depressing. Like, you can see that there are large tracts where I didn't see anything that was native, except perhaps, you know, some of those plants that I mentioned that I didn't take points for, like Uhaloa and Lima. There were also a lot of native species that were missing from the assemblage along this trail. So I expected to see some Aquiliculi, for example. I did not see any Aquiliculi. These are usually pretty common coastal species. Maiapilo is another one. I know that we have Maiapilo further south at Anaiho Omalu, but I didn't see a single one growing in these areas. And that doesn't mean that they aren't there. It does, though, however, mean there aren't so many individuals that they are obvious while walking the trail. And this is something to consider, you know. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a little hard to see, but one of the outcomes of my work was the creation of an ethnobotanical brochure highlighting the coastal plants that I encountered, as well as Oiwi knowledge or Native Hawaiian knowledge regarding these plant species. So this is just a brief, this is a quick screenshot of my ethnobotanical brochure. It's actually a two-sided brochure that folks could print if you wanted to, or just look at on your phone. This is listed under the additional resources tab in our South Kohala Coastal Partnership website. So I highly encourage you to check that out if you'd like to learn more. One of the things that I highlight in this brochure are, you know, aina or place names. So before doing my work, I actually went through old maps of this 2-mile stretch of coastline, and I identified 5 different places with names pertaining to plant species in order to see whether we have any of those plants remaining in the places that are named for them. Out of those 5 different places, there were only 2 that I identified that still had plants that are referred to in those names. So Ma'umai Beach, for example, Ma'umai refers to wilted grass. There are native grasses growing in that area, specifically aki-aki. Thankfully the aki-aki there is not wilted. But that name still refers to the area being very hot, which Ma'umai is very, very hot most of the time. Kaunaoa Bay also does have kaunaoa growing there, which is very exciting. There's a very big, healthy patch of kaunaoa there, but it's also the only patch of kaunaoa that I saw during this entire 2-mile stretch of coastline. So that, again, speaks volumes for, you know, the abundance or the lack thereof of some of our native species. All right, and then along with the ethnobotanical brochure, I created a list of, I'm sorry, not a list, but a plant identification cards pertaining to 20 different species that I saw along the trail, including some species that I actually did not see, but that should be in these areas. So again, these highlight Ike Hawaiisa Hawaiian knowledge pertaining to these plants, such as their uses in La'aulapa'au Hawaiian medicine, or lei making, or kapa production. I also have a brief, easy to digest sort of description of the plants as well for folks who don't have a background in botany. Photographs of the plants, you know, their Hawaiian name, their scientific name and such. And so these could be, again, printed by teachers or educators, used in the classroom. You know, you could just use it on your phone if you're out at the beach and you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. Let's see if maybe it's in the, you know, in the ID cards. And I do hope to add more to this at some point in the future, but these were just, again, 20 of the species that I thought were most important to highlight for our South Kohala coastline. Alrighty. So the next organization that I worked with through the South Kohala Coastal Partnership was the Nature Conservancy. TNC was formed in 1951 in response to a national desire to protect and preserve our wild spaces. The Hawaii chapter was established in 1980, and at present they protect 1.5 million acres of forest across the Pai'aina of Hawaii. The Marine Program has worked since 2000 to protect marine ecosystems with partner agencies, And like a lot of these other organizations that I've done work with, they combine both Western scientific practices with local and indigenous knowledge systems and local values as well. And so here's a picture of the loco down at the loco at Hilo, and I'll explain more about Hilo as well. I'm sure most of us present know about Hilo, but it's one of my favorite places, so I'm going to be talking about it that one. All right, so the Lolono owl that helped guide my work here was Pilikau Piliho'oilo, together in the dry season, together in the wet season. This is said of a loving companionship. I was inspired by the relationship between the Nature Conservancy and Hui Aloha Kiholo. The Hui was founded in 2007 to protect, perpetuate, and enhance the cultural and natural landscape of the Kiholo Bay area through collaborative management and active community stewardship. The Hui includes lineal descendants of Hilo and the Kekaha region, who preserve and employ Ike Kupuna through their malama. Together, the Nature Conservancy and the Hui have created a remarkable relationship that brings OEV voices and traditional stewardship to the forefront of conservation management. So seen here is an image of one of our, I think this is one of our dryland Hui work days, actually. So a whole bunch of people from all sorts of different organizations getting together and moving pohaku from one location to another to help build up the rock wall around the loco. Oh, I can hear the helico outside my window scratching. I'm going to have to cut that thing down later today. All right, so background information also on our Pelikane restoration trials. So this is one of the things that I helped work with folks with the Nature Conservancy on. So this is a 1.83 fenced exclosure that was constructed in the Pelikane watershed. The purpose of this was to do revegetation trials to better understand what plants do best with what types of planting methods. So 8 different soil preparation and seeding or planting methods were employed, including basic seed scattering and hydromulching as well. Trials involve monitoring plants along transects to assess factors such as species composition, height, and leaf litter. So that's a picture of me on the ground with one of our quadrats reading data inside of the quadrat pertaining to the plant growth in the area. And then my classmate, Michaela, who works for the Nature Conservancy in the foreground with me. All right, and here's a good shot actually of the transect. So, I'm sorry, of the quadrat along the transect. So basically in doing these monitoring events, we were putting the quadrats down and reading data within it in a systematic way. So measuring the heights of the plants inside, species composition, age of the plants, other ground cover such as the rocks or leaf litter as well. So my Hana and Kudanan, this was assisting in these monitoring trials. I'm a plant nerd, and so I was more than happy to be the plant nerd for these days. And Brian did mention that more information has come out regarding the data generated by these trials. So I might be updating this information for my later talk in May, but initial results do suggest that hydromulch increases seedling germination and litter cover. Soil tilling can also be beneficial to some species. It can be initially disruptive, but it can help with some species growth. And directly outplanted seedlings had differential survival rates. So some species did much better than others. I believe Kwaya, for example, did much better in this area than say Akia for outplants. And this has really important implications for future revegetation efforts in this region. So I wish I had a really good photo to show you folks what this area looks like, but these upper reaches of Pelikane are, I don't like words like desolate or barren. There are plants growing there, but there are very few plants. These areas are very dry, very, very hot, very, very windy. And so a lot of the erosion and sedimentation that we experience, further down slope in the Kai, in the ocean, is coming from upland as the winds are blowing these things down when we have really heavy rain events and the soil is just not ready for that. It just, washes all the soil out into the ocean. Being able to revegetate these areas and grow native forests is beneficial, not just for the sake of growing native species. I mean, they have intrinsic value, of course, but again, to protect our ocean ecosystems further downshore as well. All right, so back to Kiholo. So here's a beautiful picture of a sunset in the water down there. So Kiholo Bay is located in the Kekaha Vaiole or Kona, the waterless Kekaha region of Kona and the Ahupua'a of Pu'uwaba'a. The bountiful waters of Kiholo have long sustained generations of Oiwi and Kama'aina families. The shoreline encompasses treasured wahikupuna or ancestral sites, including remaining sections of the historic Loko'i'a or fish pond that once fed thousands of people. So this Loko'i'a was constructed during Kamehameha the first reign and once spanned about 600 acres of coastline. And I could be wrong. I actually think, if I'm not mistaken, that the Loko'i'a might have been constructed prior to Kamehameha and he might have revitalized it. I could be wrong about that. But in any case, it's been there for a very long time. The Mauna Loa eruption of 1859 overtook much of the Loko'i'a's architecture, reducing the pond to about 3.2 acres to this day. 7 acres of Kiholo Bay were purchased by Paul Mitchell in the 1980s, which included remaining sections of the historic Loko'i'a. After his passing, his son, Angus Mitchell, donated the parcel to the Nature Conservancy in 2011. And the Nature Conservancy cares for these lands in partnership with Hui Aloha Kiholo. In 2019, a section near the pond wall was fenced off for vegetation restoration, including kiawe cutting and then outplanting native species. And one thing I'd like to highlight, I mean, kiawe, I wish I had a photo. Again, like these are some pictures that I should bring in when I give this talk again in May. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to be cutting down these kiawe trees. No herbicide is being used for that because it's such a sensitive area. So instead, stumps are being cut and then covered up to prevent growth. And it's really awesome. Like I would love for you folks to be able to see this at some point in the future. All right, next slide. Awesome. So I've helped with a number of different projects down there since being the South Kohala Coastal Partnership intern. I assisted with a visiting group called Blue Water Youth Exchange last summer. So they were down there for a couple of days and I just came down to help, you know, give my hana, be able to explain more about the history of the area to them. I am personally very excited to be helping with outplanting and maintenance in the outplanted section. I had the honor of leading our outplanting team actually during our first volunteer day that happened in 3 years. So we used to have these, Kiholo used to have these really amazing once a month volunteer opportunities. And with the pandemic, unfortunately, you know, that had to shut down for health and safety reasons, but we did have one of our volunteer days in January of this year. And it was really, really meaningful to be there. I used to participate in the volunteer days prior to the pandemic. So not only being able to be there was really meaningful to me, but being able to lead a group in planting native species felt really, honestly, it was really remarkable for me. It felt very, it was a really high honor, honestly. So there's a picture of me all covered up so I don't get burnt, showing people our native plants, getting people excited about them and putting them in the ground. And I think things are doing really, really well down there right now, which is exciting. Awesome. So one of the other groups that I've been doing work with is the Ridge to Reef Ahupua'a Watershed Education Project. I'll be referring to them as Ridge to Reef from here on out because it's I'm a bit of a mouthful, but they're funded by by NOAA through their Bay Watershed Education and Training Program, or BWET program. Ridge to Reef aims at improving the socio-ecological resilience in Kohala Hema, or South Kohala, through educating students, enhancing their pilina or relationships with place, and getting them directly involved in restoration activities. The project is currently focusing on students at Waimea Middle School and Waikoloa Middle School. And this includes educational and hands-on opportunities such as guest presentations, field trips to environmental sites, water quality monitoring, outplanting native species, trail maintenance, and art projects pertaining to our Aina. And I worked under the guidance of Eileen Grossman while doing this work. Yeah. Oh, and to go back, that was a photo. I don't have any pictures of me working with the kids, unfortunately, but that was just a photo that I took at Waimea Middle School. They have some really beautiful murals that they painted, and that one was of water coming down the staircase. And I was like, what a beautiful, homage to our watershed. So I thought that was great. Okay. So the Olelo No'eau that helped guide me with this work was Heva Kumu Waiho Ikeki. Faults of the source are left to the children. This was a little bit heavy. I went through the entire Olelo No'eau book, looking for anything having to do with children, kind of looking for something that was like, children are our future. But when I found this one, it really spoke to me because although this Olelo No'eau more pertains to if the parents are do something wrong, the children have to clean that up. I would say this for me kind of goes back further than just, one generation past, but rather to many generations before. Sadly, children around the world face the unprecedented challenge of inheriting a deeply wounded planet. Our keiki today suffer the consequences of maladaptive decisions committed generations past in Hawaii in particular. The brutal ongoing effects of colonization differentially impact Oiwi children, and this issue reverberates globally in thousands of indigenous communities. It is therefore imperative that we provide our keiki with the best resources available so that they can develop into their best possible selves. Being honest about the challenges they face is vital, yet we can still face these challenges together with passion, creativity, and enthusiasm. And it is a lot of work. So I helped lead a huaka'i down at Ohai'ula in last year with the entire 7th grade class of Waimea Middle School, teaching them about our coastal plants, getting them excited about, Ike Hawaii, Hawaiian knowledge practices around these plant species. I also helped by giving 2 presentations in the classroom with students at Waimea Middle School. And that was specifically with Jade Bowman's Going Native elective class. So my presentations focused on the importance of our watershed, especially in the Pelekane watershed that provides Waimea and nearby regions with much of our water. So I challenged students with questions in order to enhance engagement, asking them about threats that they believe our watershed faces, management actions that they would implement if they were working in conservation, for example. And I do want to just mention, I went to Waimea Middle School myself. And so it's been really meaningful to be able to go back to my middle school and teach the keiki there about the importance of our watershed. When I was a kid, we were just starting to get curricula like that. Jade Bowman herself actually was one of my teachers. So it's been really awesome working alongside her and being able to share with the kids, hey, I'm from here. Like, I'm from Waikoloa. I went to school up here in Waimea. And here I am, and I'm doing work in, environmental restoration and conservation. You guys can be doing this work too. You can start when you're young, just with little things here and there. But those little things are tremendous. They make a big difference. And I strongly believe that, getting keiki excited about the stuff when they're young, it makes a big difference. Like, as they get older, they will retain this knowledge and they'll pass it down to future generations as well. All right, and then to just kind of wrap things up, another thing that I've been working with, this is a very deep passion project, something that I'm going to be continuing for the rest of my life, long after I'm done with grad school. So I'm currently conducting an oral history project under the mentorship of Dr. Catherine Bezio. My project focuses on interviewing kupuna kapa practitioners who are noted masters of their work. In this image, we see one of my aunties beating bauke bast on a pohaku anvil. So with the help of my kumu, Rowan Hufford, I was able to identify 5, including her, prominent kupuna who have been making kapa for a very long time and have a very deep relationship with this work. And what I'm exploring in this is I'm focusing on the pilina, the relationships that they share with the natural materials and landscapes that they rely on to be able to make kapa. So I'm guessing a lot of you might know what kapa is, but I'm just going to do a real quick, because we've got a few minutes here, background on what kapa is. So historically, kapa was used for everything fabric related in Hawaii, including clothing, bedding, baby swaddling, funeral shrouds, and also as a ceremonial item as well. By the mid-19th century, kapa was seldom made, having been replaced by the convenience of imported textiles. And in 1870, Samuel Kamakau wrote, "All are dead who knew how to make coverings and loincloths and skirts and adornments, and all that made the wearers look dignified and proud and distinguished," which emphasizes how diminished this practice had become. But kapa was revived in the 1960s and 70s by several prominent Hawaiian women who laboriously researched this dormant craft to bring it back to life. In the past several decades, an interest in kapa has blossomed throughout the islands with growing numbers of haumana, including myself. As mentioned, I have been a student of kapa since 2017 under Rowan Hufford. Despite the evolution that kapa has undergone, it remains a vital aspect of cultural identity for many folks. Importantly, this craft relies heavily on our aina. So the cloth itself is made with the inner bast, or I'm sorry, the bast, which is the inner bark. It's not the outer bark. People call it bark cloth, which is a bit of a misnomer, but the bast of wauke primarily, which is known as paper mulberry, Brucinetia peperifera. And traditional decorative techniques include plant-based dyes and soils as well from local areas. Although the expanding interest in kappa is heartening, this art form remains in danger due to factors such as climate change, rampant development, and the loss of our native ecosystems. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I didn't list it here, but some of the questions that I'm asking my narrators are: where do they source their wauke? What are the relationships they share to the natural materials they use and the aina from which they are sourced? And have they observed any environmental changes in their area or in the areas where they source their materials? So in conducting my interviews, I'm recording my interviews, and I will be using a program called Otter AI to transcribe these recordings. Recorded interviews and transcripts will be archived with the Center for Oral History at UH-Manoa, so folks can have access to those in the future. I will also be creating a story map, which will be highlighting the aina that's important to my narrators, including images of their artwork, quotes from the interviews, and this will be translated into Olelo Hawaii for greater accessibility. So these are things that will be forthcoming. You know, I'm really, really excited about this, guys. I feel very fortunate to be able to do this work. This is just a very, very small way for me to give back to our kappa community. You know, I strongly believe that hearing the stories of these kupuna in their own words is vital. Being able to have this for ourselves, for them, for their ohana, for other kappa makers, for our community at large is really, really important. You know, I definitely can't emphasize enough that the stories that people share in their own words are inherently valuable. But I would also say that kappa makers are, you know, we're in a very unique bracket in the sense that because we rely on natural spaces to do this work, we have, you know, unique perspectives that we're bringing into the observations that we're making and the relationships that we share with our natural environment. So it's been very interesting hearing about some of the changes folks have observed in their lifetimes, even in my own short lifetime and my short amount of time making kappa. I have also observed a lot of changes to our local landscapes. So I think that by the time I'm giving my final presentation as a grad student on May 4th, I will hopefully have some story map snippets that I can share with you folks. All right, so I don't know how to wrap this up, to be honest, but I've learned so much in working with all these different organizations. I have really, really deepened my own pilina with our landscapes and with the amazing people that I've had the honor of being able to work alongside. Doing the work for Ala Kahakai was really transformative for me, honestly. I love our plant species, but I think that I really took our coastal plants for granted big time. And I think that unfortunately that can be easy to do because a lot of time when we go down to our beaches, we're not seeing as many native species as we are non-native or invasive species. But now I'm like hyper focused on finding those natives every time I go to the beach. And I'm really excited to share that with people because I think the more interest we have, the more we can make a difference in these environments. I was actually really scared at first to be working with the South Kohala Coastal Partnership because the word coastal kind of threw me off. I was like, I'm a terrestrial plant person. Like, I don't know what I can possibly do with them. But I was wrong. And I'm really glad I was because this has been a remarkable journey, honestly. So mahalo everybody for having me and for teaching me and supporting me. I've had a great time and I'm excited to continue to Malama Aina for the rest of my life. I'm not going anywhere other than maybe a vacation after all of this. But aside from that, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. So yeah. And I think in my next slide, I just have some mahalo to all the folks that have helped support me. Yeah. Oh, it cut off. That's okay. I'll fix that. Yeah, these are just a few names of people who have helped me on this journey. So with that said, we've got about 10 minutes left for any questions that people have, or maybe if there are questions in the chat, if Bryant wants to read those to me. I'm gonna have a sip of
Hey,
water.
Avalon, just want to congratulate you on a wonderful presentation. What a great
Thanks.
job. You contributed so much to us here in Kohala, as well as Alakakai Trail. So thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing, and just best wishes to you for your future. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing you around. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Mahalo. All right. Yeah. Yeah, it's been really, really fun. I just want to walk the whole Alakakai at this point, honestly. Wouldn't that be something? I would really love to document all the vegetation that I
Do
can
it.
find. And that's where, yeah, and that's where like it occurred to me, like when I put together the map, I was like, wait a minute, there is Akulukuli growing just north of where I started my survey. And I was like, okay, I need to go back there and take points for those Akulukuli that are growing right at the mouth of Pelicane Bay, essentially. But the rest of the trail, I was like, where are they? Why aren't they here? But
Well,
still,
people have done it. People have done the entire trail from Upolu Point to Volcanoes National Park. They've done it.
Man,
Yep.
that's intense. You'd have to have people dropping water for you the whole way.
Yeah. You need a support system.
Yes, definitely. Did any folks have any questions for me or any clarifications? I know that's like a lot of information. Thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat. Oh, Chad, thank you for dropping a map of the Waihai beaches. I'm going to go ahead and save that.
Looks like someone with the acronym NHH has a question. If they want to take
sure.
themselves off mute.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, it looks like
Avalon, this is Liana Honda Avalon. I'm NHH. Sorry, I can't change my name, but I did have the question about the Kaunaoa because I do understand that there's a native one, but there's also a non-native.
Right. From what I understand, I did see the native species, and I'll probably need to take like closer looks, but I took photographs of it and other people did confirm with me that they're pretty sure it's a native. I think the non-native is a lot, if I'm not mistaken, it's thinner and it's more green, whereas our native species is a lot more, it has that real deep orange coloration. But that is a really good point, and that's something for me to consider is just sometimes when we do encounter these things, we can get excited and be like, oh, look, it's a native. And then it's like, oh, just kidding. I think the most exciting thing that I found was I came across a Niopapa. And for those of you who don't know, unfortunately, our Nio trees are really not doing well right now. We have this invasive thrip, this insect that has been here for a little over a decade now that's causing significant damage. But finding just that one Nio tree along the trail, I was like, oh my God, look at you. And I still had to like take pictures and be like, are you definitely a Nio tree? Or are you something else? Just want to make sure. But yeah, it's a really good question. I should just double check that. So I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's identifiable. I read something online not too long ago looking at the flowers of it, and I thought the green one was the more green was the native one, but I'm not sure. So when you find out, let me know.
No, that's a good point. And that's where, of course, the patch that I found, I didn't see any flowers on it. And that's where I was like, that's where with plants, you usually want to take pictures of the flowers or the fruits to really get a good look at things. Stems alone, leaves alone aren't going to be as descriptive. So I'll have to pop down there and see if it's flowering anytime soon. It's growing on a big patch of Pohinahina and also Naupaka down there, more on the north side of the beach. And it's a funny thing is I think growing up going to Kaunaoa Bay, I was always like, why is it called Kaunaoa? I never go to that north side. That's where all the tourists are. So finally I walked through the north side this time and I was like, oh, there it is. I've just never been able to enjoy it because I'm always like far south side, stay away from all the people. But yeah, I got to explore a little bit more, obviously. All right. Any other questions, folks? No more questions. I feel like I have a lot of questions, honestly. I came away from all of this like I've got more questions than answers. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, if there's no more questions or anything, mahalo for all the mahalos in the chat. I really appreciate it, guys. This has been really fun. And I will just mention, I kind of dropped the hints a few times throughout, but I'm giving my final presentation for my grad program on May 4th. My talk is going to be from noon to 12:45. That's a Thursday, so it's kind of a weird day of the week, but I will be sending out Zoom links to everybody here once the Zoom link has been generated. It's an in-person event that also has a virtual component, so I'll be talking to a group of people in person, but we will also have it on Zoom for folks. So, if anybody was interested in today and they want to tune in live next time, let them know. Otherwise, this talk today has been recorded and it'll be uploaded on the South Kohala Coastal Partnership website for later viewing as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Avalon, for presenting today. And thank you so much for all the work that you've done with the partnership. It has been great having you in all of the different projects. Thank you, everybody else, for coming today and attending the speaker series. And please come again to future speaker series. We'd love to have you come and listen to all the wonderful work that is being done here in the partnership. And so with that,